We are Entras. Together, we build software for controlling flexible assets for the industry.
We strongly believe that the future will be flexible. Any industry, big or small, any building, any home will make use and make profit out of flexibility.
That future starts now. In this podcast series, Flexing the Future, we share our insights on flexibility.
Welcome to our podcast, Flexing the Future. Today, we will discuss energy flexibility for industry. What is it and why is it important? I'm Frank from Entras, and next are my colleagues Jens and Jeroen. So, flexibility. Everybody talks about it, it seems, but what is it?
Yeah, well, with the energy transition, there is a lot of variable production. And in a sense, what is flexibility is you have to balance against supply and demand of electricity. And because supply has become very volatile, demand has to be able to follow that. And if you do that as a consumer, typically an off-taker of electricity, it's mainly a problem of the electricity market, then you are providing flexibility. And this is what it is. Of course, there is a need for flexibility due to these renewables. From an industrial standpoint, what you are a potential supplier of flexibility. And therefore, you need assets, you need equipment that can react to typically price signals, because this coordination is a price signal driven in the liberalized markets we have here in Europe. So flexibility is reacting to market prices with your assets, and by doing so, reducing typically your energy cost and integrating more renewable energy. So that is, in a nutshell, I believe what flexibility for industry should be.
Yeah, and I would like to go into more detail regarding those markets. So there's always, people say there are different markets, or they say there are different market products. What does this mean, actually?
Well, yeah, I think it's a good question because it's quite complex. So in principle, it's all about electricity. Yeah? We are talking about electricity markets. On a market, you buy and you sell stuff. So in this case, it's electricity. The cornerstone of the market, so to say, could be considered the spot market. So this means on the spot you buy and sell electricity. In Belgium and Europe, this is an hourly market. So this means that there is a single price for every hour, and this price defines how much you are paid when you produce electricity or how much you pay when you consume electricity. So this is one market, a cornerstone. But next to this, you have lots of electricity markets. One of them is, for example, the balancing markets, also known as the ancillary services. It's also a market product, but it's a bit different. There you don't really sell or buy electricity, but it's more like a service that you offer to the system operator.
That's why it's called.
That's why it's
ancillary services
indeed, but they also call it the balancing markets. So there is lots of terminology in this field. Yeah.
And maybe the reason why, and this is why electricity markets are a bit different, because electricity is a commodity, like any commodity market. But what's specific about electricity, in the past at least, we were told, well, electricity cannot be stored. So in the meantime, we have certain equipment, assets like lithium-ion batteries who can store electricity. And of course, I think it's part of industrial flexibility to do so. But the problem is always there. An electricity grid has to be balanced at all times. So the amount of electricity that is flowing into an electricity grid has to be equal to the amount of electricity that is taken out. And that is a balance that has to be every millisecond even this has to be the case. And this is why electricity markets are designed in this way that on the spot market, as Jens said, is actually day ahead. So you clear that market, you know the prices one day up front. And this day ahead gives the time for the parties to organize these auctions, to have a price that is formed between the players in the market.
A question, you compare it, you say it's a commodity, but the prices can also get negative. Like with other commodities like oil, I don't see the
Well,
prices become negative quite quickly.
Not so quickly, but it does happen. But it typically happens on spot markets. I think during the energy crisis, at some point, we had so much LNG ships coming towards Belgium. But in Belgium, we could not absorb all this LNG gas in the system. At that moment in time, we also had negative gas prices. In a way, negative prices on a commodity market is just a price signal. It signals that there is just too much. Of course, in electricity markets, this has become now something very, it's something daily. If there is a lot of solar, a lot of PV panels, they are injecting so much electricity. And actually, you know it day ahead. We know it up front. Tomorrow it will be a sunny day. We are pretty certain there will be more gigawatts of solar injected tomorrow than we will need. And typically what happens is that you get negative prices. I know it's a very media sexy topic because, negative prices sounds cool, but in essence, it's just a signal from the market to say, guys, we have to balance supply and demand and we have an extreme imbalance.
Maybe a question then, because somebody is producing it. So if the prices get negative, why don't they just stop producing it?
That's true.
How does that work?
Yeah. Normally, if everybody could stop producing it or would do so, then the prices would stop at zero. So it would be normal to observe rather zero prices. The problem is there is a lot of, especially on solar, a lot of PVs on the rooftops of people at homes. And they are not reacting to daily prices. That is one element. So they don't stop and they push the prices negative. The second element is there are sometimes subsidies involved. And if you get, let's say, 80 euros for a megawatt hour produced, until the prices is minus 80, you still earn something by producing. So there are a few reasons why prices can become negative. Another more fundamental topic, as in the example with the shipper, is that sometimes it's just not worthwhile stopping or stopping to deliver because 1 or 2 hours later you have to start again. This is what you have, for instance, with a gas-fired power plant. Stopping and starting also has a cost, and if it's only for 1 or 2 hours negative prices, you just run through the negative prices. It's less costly than completely stopping and starting.
So flexibility is that you have a kind of a capability to stop quicker than others can and would like to do.
Exactly. And that is also why there are different markets, because there is the different timing. So the cornerstone is the day ahead market, and it's rather predictable. But when you get closer to delivery, so in the day itself, let's say at 9 o'clock, there was the day ahead market. The prices were based on certain assumptions on solar and wind and consumption, but in practice there will be a bit less solar and a bit more wind, and it will be a bit different, and that is when then these other products kick in to restore the balance. So at first there is this intraday trading, which is rather the market players themselves doing corrections to their day ahead position, but then in the last resort it's the grid operator in Belgium, it's the TSO Elia, that is then has certain reserves available to keep the balance up to the last second, and this is then what we mentioned, the balancing service.
But this is a complicated system, so all those parties that you just named, they have each of them have their own role. But if we now look at the side of the industry, because they do not need to understand this complex system, what do they see and how can they make use of it?
Well, I think the first thing they see now, and that is rather new, is that they will see the spot prices. So the new contracts for industry, almost always, there's some kinds of a price formula, but it normally boils down to the fact that you're exposed to the spot prices. And this is something new, and I think in a way it's maybe a bit uncomfortable because if you were used to very stable prices, fixed prices, it is a new complexity. But I think it's a reality. On the other hand, it is rather predictable. So you can take it up in your planning of the factory, and just when prices are low, consume a bit more, and prices are high, consume a bit less, and shift a bit within the limits of what is possible. So the spot prices, I think that is the first thing you see as an industrial party, and it's difficult to escape from it, I'm afraid. Hedging will not solve that problem. There is still spot price exposure. The question is, if you want to tap into this more closer to real-time markets. Intraday is more difficult if you want to participate in balancing services. I think there you have a lot of service providers, suppliers that offer solutions to package this type of products in a way that makes it absolutely feasible to do so. For instance, these balancing services, if you really want to offer them directly to the market, you have to do so to Elia, with a lot of complications and regulation and obligations. While if you do it through an aggregator, which is some kind of a supplier role, but then typically to aggregate these balancing services, then it is not so difficult. So I would say from an industry point of view, you find solutions in a maturing market to do so.
But to make it more concrete, so there are different balancing services, but if you're an industry that wants to make use of it, at which balancing services would you look first and why?
Well, I think it depends a bit on your system and on your assets that you have. Because as Jeroen mentioned, we have the spot market. So today it's an hourly market. You have 24 hourly prices and it's more or less predictable. And you also have the prices cleared the day before. So you could integrate this in your planning, for example. You can optimize your process planning so to consume a bit more when price is low, consume a bit less when price is high. This is possible for, I think, many assets and many industrial processes. If you go more to the real time and you go to the balancing services, there you are being steered by a signal from the system operator, from the TSO. This also comes very close to real time. It's not the day in advance that the price is known. It's more real time that you are activated. This is not possible for every industrial asset. But for example, an electric boiler, which is next to a gas-fired boiler, this one could be steered quite flexible and could also be steered last minute because you still have your fossil fuel backup. So I think it really depends on the asset, on the process, how you should look at those different flexibility markets.
Yes, and maybe one thing to add, which is especially true for industry. In industry, you should not, you never only optimize electricity, you optimize energy, which is typically 2/3 is gas and 1/3 is only electricity roughly, and you use it for cold, for heat, for different things. So of course, it is more complex, but I think that is a complexity that our industrial customers, that's their daily job. They know that very well. But it gives an opportunity because, as is the case for the e-boiler, which is an easy case to understand. The others are all more complex variants of that, I would say. But it's basically the fact that you can switch. You have a gas boiler and an e-boiler, both can produce the same steam. And so when electricity is cheap, then low, so cheaper than gas for a certain hour, then you use the e-boiler. When electricity is more expensive, which is on average it is, but not every hour, you use the gas boiler. And actually industrial, by the fact that an industry has multiple assets, several equipment like an e-boiler, a gas boiler, a CHP, a freezer, a lot of equipment, they have choices. And by the fact that they have choices, they can tap much more into these flexibility markets without hurting the process. Of course, you need some smart planning, some good algorithms to protect your process from that. That is true.
Yeah, it seems to me that they need a fairly good control of their process. And that they know what will happen. Also, if they make products, that they know, we're getting this kind of materials in and this amount of products out. Because if you do not know that the day before, it's more difficult, no?
It's true, but I think most of our industrial customers, they master their processes quite well. Sometimes, there's a bit of data lacking, and typically that is then a process ongoing to have this data available and make it transparent and actionable, I would say, and management speak. But our customers typically, they know what they are doing with the process. That is not the problem. The problem is rather, do they know, are they comfortable enough to use the flexibility that they will not bring in trouble the process. I would say that is and of course, therefore you need, it's a bit of a specialist job. But I do believe that flexibility in industry belongs rather to the process than to the market. That's a bit of philosophy at Entras. And this is why we rather do this optimization work for the process rather than for the market. So we do it for the process. We know what is available on which timeframes and what fits best with which product. And then we offer it to the market through the supplier and the aggregator from our customers. We at Entras, we are not the aggregators, so we are not the suppliers.
Well, maybe to add on this, you could also split it in two. You have an industrial process, which is made up of lots of assets, lot of sub-processes, lots of utilities as well. We have been talking about heating, about cooling. You can see that as a utility, and if you place a buffer in between, you could have some more flexibility on the utility side without having any impact on the production planning or the production processes. And then, of course, you have the flexibility, which is really inside of the production process, the core process, and there, you will have some impact on the production planning. You will have impact on how much products are being produced at every moment in time.
Yeah, I think you can see it in 3 waves, and we are currently in the second wave. So the first wave that started roughly 10 years ago is when these ancillary services were priced and were available for the industry through aggregators. Typically, that helped a lot in the business model to make it feasible, and then typically, CHPs were steered, for instance, on some of these products, EFRR or MFRR. That was the first wave. It was only these balancing services that gave enough money or generated sufficient money to have a business case. So that was the first wave. I think now we are in the second wave, where we are still on the level of the energy assets or the utilities, and not yet on the deepest level of the process itself. So we don't touch the amount of cookies that are baked or the amount of product that is produced. We make sure that there is enough heat and cold available to the process, but the equipment which we make this heat, that we can play with, and we don't only do it with ancillary services, we also do it really on the spot markets. So that's the second wave. And that is where we are now, and I think that is still rather decoupled from the process, or at least the algorithms can make sure that it is decoupled, and you can add buffers to make it easier. Of course, the third wave, that's a bit more avant-garde today, is where you really steer your process itself, the core business, the end product you make, and use that to create more flexibility. There are, for instance, I say the chloralkali electrolyzers is pure electricity, and you make chlorine. Yes, of course, they have always done it, because it was always the case. But that's a very specific topic. But if you're baking cookies, it's less evident that you start influencing the cookie baking process. Of course.
Well, I think it depends. It's probably what's the amount of energy cost in your total production cost. I think for chloralkali, it's quite clear that electricity is I think the highest cost in producing your chlorine gas. If you bake some cookies, you need some heat for the baking, but probably the ingredients will cost a lot more than the energy to bake them. So that's why probably they are a bit behind, or maybe the electrolyzer are a bit in front of providing flexibility.
And I think also we should not underestimate how much storage, so how much resilience or storage there is in processes. Often there are operational buffers. Let's say, for instance, you have a CHP to provide hot water to the process, but there is a hot water tank already. That hot water tank was maybe there already since 15 years. It was initially placed just for operational reasons, to have a stable operating CHP or something like this. It was put for that, but it has a buffer capacity of several hours of heat demand of the factory. Well, these assets, they are there today, but actually they are a battery of energy. You use electricity or gas, so it depends a bit how the system looks like. But you use energy sources to store energy in that buffer. And in the past, we looked at it as operational buffers. But you can now look with, I would say, a different lens and see that actually there is storage of electricity of energy possible, which then again makes it possible to, without disrupting the process or interrupting the process, still have some assets reacting to prices.
All right. Storage we'll discuss in another podcast in more detail, I guess.
Yeah, it's I would say the next level flexibility.
So for an application of flexibility to an industrial process, maybe we can discuss an example. step by step to make clear how it's done. For instance, there's a case of which you often see in the food industry, where water is needed for a certain water at a certain temperature, maybe 90 degrees or 70 degrees, or maybe even cold water. They have typically buffer tanks for this kind of heat source, let's say. How could this be made flexible? And how can they get cost savings out of using flexibility?
I think indeed in the food sector you do have some buffers available. They were not put there for flexibility purposes, not for an economical gain or something, but just for operational purposes. If your heat requirement from the process is quite peaky and not baseload, it's interesting to put a buffer there so that on the production side of your heat, you can have like a stable production.
For,
and that's
for batch processes.
Yeah, for example, indeed. Yeah. So in the past, this was why there was a buffer. Now it's often the other way around. So instead of having like a more baseload heat production, then your buffer and then a peaky heat demand from the process, you could also use that buffer economically. And now also at the heat production side, you can put like a peaky profile there. If you put a heat pump, if you put an e-boiler and you want to steer it on a certain market when the prices are low, you can use that buffer just to make sure that the process still has the heat when it is demanding heat, but the buffer, is economically to be optimized, and this is done by putting an electric boiler or a heat pump at the front side of the buffer, so to say.
Right, and which market products regarding flexibility can be used there in such cases?
Well, I think as we said again, so the spot market is a bit of the cornerstone. It's also the market where the most energy and megawatt hours is bought and sold. So I think this one is a really important one. Also because it's cleared the day ahead, so day -1. You can, in combination with prediction of your heat demand, etc., you can optimize on this hourly spot market. And then on top, you can also add ancillary services. You can also allow maybe a certain part or a certain asset to be steered based on a signal coming from the system operator. So you can really have a combination of different market products on a single system.
Yes, and I would say we used the two as the cornerstone, which is the day-ahead market, the spot market, and then the balancing services for more real-time steering. Some of our customers, they like a bit more of a gamble, and they say, okay, well, I'm so confident about what will happen tomorrow that I will even nominate to the BRP, so that you promise what you will offtake. It's called the process of nomination on the electricity markets, and everything what deviates from that, you're ready to pay the imbalance bonus or malus penalty, which is another mechanism. It's a bit, I would say, the other coin of the medal, the other side of the medal of the grid services. But if you would do it, I would say, uncontrolled, then you would probably lose money, or at best have a zero sum. But if you can actively steer it, but that's very fast steering, then you can. There are interesting profits to be made. But that requires that you have you process very much a lot of very well under control, and then you can even do it on that way. So that's a third mechanism.
What do you mean with very fast?
Well, in this case, typically imbalances are measured on a quarterly hour basis. But okay, that means that you have to be able to steer or react on minute basis, I would say. Right. If you want to make sure that even if you have forecasted on the wrong side after minute 7, that you have 8 more minutes to correct the position. Okay. That's a bit what you do.
But whether that's fast or slow actually depends on the process behind it.
It depends on the process, So some processes that it's horrible if you should change set points on minute basis. Also, some assets just not capable of doing so. While typically the e-boiler, it's rather simple equipment, and that can easily deal with these fast fluctuations without any impact on durability, lifetime, on process, whatever. So it depends a bit which processes. Yes.
All right. I would also like to explain another example, the one of a waste incinerator, so a waste processing plant. So what happens there is basically waste from the community is brought to the incinerator installation. The incinerator incinerated, burns the waste, and the heat from the process gets converted into steam, and they drive a steam turbine, and they can produce electricity and or can deliver heat to other parties. That's how that normally works. And just to give an impression of flexibility, normally those waste plants were designed to run at 100% load. So the full waste capacity was used. But throughout the years, what you see in this sector, communities don't want to produce more waste. They want to produce less waste. And they've put, in Belgium, in Europe, they've put KPIs on it to reduce waste per inhabitant. And you see that also in those waste incinerator installations, the average load is much lower now. It could be maybe for a specific waste product still be 100%, but a lot of them, they run at load capacities between 70 and 90%, which means they have between 10 and 40% capacity that is not used. So what could be done is that since a waste plant, they normally have a big capacity to collect waste, because if the plant is not working, you do not want the waste to pile up in the roads. You want to pile it up in a secure place. So they have the possibility of sometimes burning more waste and sometimes burning less waste, but over days, maybe over a week. And those ovens, those incinerators, they're quite slow in changing operations, so they cannot move quickly. But you can change the load set point over, let's say, 1 hour. You can go from 90% to 80% in 1 hour. That's kind of logical. So this kind of installations could be used, for instance, on this day-ahead market, where you know the price is a day before. So you could make a schedule for them to run for the next day, and the whole process, that means the waste needs to be brought with a big crane into the incomer of the oven. Everything can be scheduled and even automated. So this is an example of a clear optimization on the day-ahead market. Maybe for them an optimization on another market is also possible, but then you need to find something in the process that could move very quickly. If you want to have this ancillary services or imbalance with this reaction on minutes, maybe there's some steam system that allows it, maybe not.
Yeah.
If it's not there, you could always try to look to install it, and then you could build in of flexibility in your process, or you could change a component, make a valve reacting quicker, and then that could be worth doing, depending on the expected income of the flexibility product and depending on the investment cost of the installation change. But a very important point in this flexibility is that apparently not a lot of industries go forward with it at this moment. They keep waiting with their decisions. And why do you think that would be?
I would say it is a bit of voortschrijdend inzicht, as you would say in Dutch. So there is less experience. The
progressing insight.
Progressing insights. So there is not. It is a new element. 5 years ago, the spot markets, the day-ahead markets, were not very volatile, so there was not much focus. I do think sometimes the debate is a bit influenced by the fact that the first wave was on these ancillary services, and that was something typically a waste incinerator. They were not really interested in that. It was not really fitting their process. So they said, flexibility is not for us. But by now, actually, they maybe discard the topic. because they think when we talk about industrial flexibility, they think balancing services, quick mandatory activations. While on spot markets, it's just a planning process, which is much closer to what an industrial party does every day anyway. Actually, if you talk about it is about this waste incinerator, if there is a week predicted with very low wind so the famous Dunkelflaute, where there's not a lot of renewable energy, there's typically patterns of a week. That's not patterns even of a day. It's typical patterns of a week, and then typically the prices they are higher. So if you would have a week of potential storage, you could run at a lower rate in the week prior to the Dunkelflaute, and then in the week of the Dunkelflaute run at full load. And then also that is actually something which is very close to the normal operation of such a plant, because it's plannable, it's and still could generate a lot of value. So I think one of the reasons why there is a slow uptake of industrial flexibility is that people think too much about ancillary services, while forget a little bit what is still possible.
Or could it be that you just need too much disciplines? For instance, what we're saying now of this week of Dunkelflaute, you need planners who are busy with the planning of the process, who know what kind of savings this can generate. And maybe those planners are just not aware of the opportunities there.
Well, I think so. Indeed, as you mentioned, it's also a matter of having a pricing or an economic incentive to do so. If you used to have like a fixed contract, or you used to get the same amount of money whether you produce it today or tomorrow, you would not think about optimizing this stuff. But indeed, the markets have become more volatile with all the renewables, with all the sun. During midday, prices are close to zero or even negative. And prices in the morning and the evening peak are quite high. So I think it's also a matter of indeed uptake in this industry is maybe a bit slow, because they used to be not exposed to these volatile prices, but today and definitely tomorrow, so to say, they will be. So maybe it's just a matter of insights they need to gather.
But the aspect of having multiple skills is also true. So you have to combine market knowledge, I would say, with process knowledge. And typically these were two different skill sets. And now you have to bring it together. And I'm not certain that there are already a lot of players in the market that provide this integrated service. I think with Entras, this is exactly what we do. What we do is we combine the operational constraints of a process and the planning constraints, and we combine it with market prices to unlock flex also on the slower markets. But it's relatively new because people typically have come from the process side, and then they are less familiar with, I would say, the market side. Or people come from, I would say, the market side. The aggregators, the suppliers, they come from the market side, but they don't have, I would say, the experience, the pedigree to really know how it works in industry. And this is with Entras what we do. And so we capture the process complexity with the digital twin, that we have a real-time view on what is happening in the process, and we link it to planning. And at the same time, we combine it and we work together with the price signals. The head price is an easy one. It's very transparent. But even with aggregators, you can, instead of having a fixed aggregator band of so many megawatts, you can make it dynamic. It's just a matter of business models evolving. But I would say combining these two skills at Entras, we do it by integrated in a software platform, and just that the complexity is not bothering anybody. The complexity is then taken care of by the software.
Yeah. All right. Maybe as a final comment in this podcast. So we started with explaining flexibility. What is it and why is it important? So maybe we can all have one statement. The why is it important?
Well, I can make a statement. Flexibility is not new. I think it's a hot topic now, but in fact it's not new. Especially in the electricity market, flexibility has always been there. The thing is just, it was on the supply side. It were coal, gas-fired power plants who could produce electricity when the demand was there. Now it's the other way around. More and more renewables, non-dispatchable, meaning they produce when there is wind, when there is sun. And we still need the flexibility like we did before, but now we need to look for the flexibility on the demand side, on the consumption side. And I think that's the challenge here in converting the whole system from a supply flexibility to a demand flexibility system.
Yeah, so I think why to build on that one, the system of tomorrow will be fully on demand for the largest extent on demand flexibility. So doing it now is actually, the direction of the system is clear. That will not change. So it's actually just one step ahead. This is one reason to do it. There is also a second one. There is a strong correlation between prices and renewable energy. And if you steer on prices, that means you shift consumption to low price moments. That is also steering consumption to moments of a lot of renewable energy. And so it means that the second why, I would say, besides the economics and just the cost, it is just a way of integrating renewable energy and decarbonizing your production process and earning money with it if you do it right. So I would say, there's no reason not to do so, but just be careful how you do it.
Yeah, all right. That's a nice final comment. All right, and we can conclude our podcast on flexibility and why it is important. Thank you very much for listening.